Okay, so first of all, I want to show you what is a sketch constraint. So constraints can be used in the sketch section. So if I click on this create sketch, and firstly, I'm going to explain to you what each constraint does. So let me start out with horizontal and vertical. This tool makes a line or 2 points straight, either horizontal or vertical, depending on which direction they're already closer to. Now, let me show you Coincident. This tool makes 2 points or a point on a line or a curve connected. Next, we have tangents. This tool makes a curve and another shape touch at one point without crossing. Next, we have equal. This tool makes similar shapes the same size. If one was to change, the other one will change too. Next, we have the parallel constraint, and this tool makes 2 lines go in the same direction and never meet. And now we have perpendicular. This tool makes 2 objects meet at a 90 degrees angle. Next, we have fixed and unfixed. This tool locks or unlocks the size and position of a point or an object. Now we have MidPoint. This tool places a point or an object exactly in the middle of another object. Next, we have Concentric. This tool makes circles, arcs or ellipses share the same center point. Next up, we have Collinear. This tool puts objects on the same straight line. For example, lining up a rectangle edge with another line. Now we have Symmetry. This tool makes shapes mirror each other across lines or axes. Next, we have Curvature. This tool connects splines and other curves smoothly, with a consistent bend between them. And now we have the Polygon. The Polygon tool is slightly different to the other tools. When you create a polygon inside of Fusion, Fusion automatically adds the constraints. And the Polygon tool creates a multi-sided shape where all the sides are equal. And Fusion just adds on a constraint to keep it that way. So, I'd like to show you now some examples. But I also want to show you the dimensions here. So if I click on create and then I click on sketch dimensions here. Or alternatively, I can use the keyboard shortcut D. So what is a dimension then? Well, a dimension is a way to tell Fusion exactly how big something should be or where it should be placed in your design. And there's a couple of ways that we could dimension things. So if I use this line, for example, and then I click from this center point, you can see highlighted in blue here in the sketch, the dimensions, and I can type in the size that I want them on my keyboard here. So I'm going to do 50mm for this example, and then I hit enter. And you can see that it's given that a dimension. Alternatively, what I can do is if I just click this line here, and then I just click around at a point, and if I press escape now on the keyboard, I can actually come back and click on this sketch dimension here. Or alternatively, I can hit D on my keyboard, and then I click on it, and I click to place the dimension. So I can refine this afterwards, and I can make this, let's say 75, for example. So there could be some cases where I just want to quickly draw something out, like that, let's say for example, and then I would just go back in and actually dimension up these lines and how you'd like them towards one another. And you can even do angles and things like that. So if this one needs to be 90 degrees angle, or alternatively, you could dimension everything up one by one as you go along. So you can make this one like 60, for example. And then you could draw another line and make it the exact dimension as well. So I'm going to now give you an example of how we can use constraints. So first of all, I want to draw out a rectangle from here. And I'm going to click on the center point and draw this out. And I'm just going to quickly give this a dimension. So let's say 50 by 25. Now you can see here that Fusion has actually automatically added some constraints. And sometimes it will do this. And if you click on the constraint, which are these little icons here, you can actually see that it tells you where the constraint is. So I can click on them and it will highlight them and I can see what they are. I can also see that the sketch is fully constrained. And I can see this because these lines have gone black. And also we've got this padlock here next to our sketch. So now let me show you why sketch constraints are really important. Because if I want to change this dimension from 50, let's say, down to 30, you can see here that this sketch actually reacts in a way that I would expect it to. Now, what do I mean by a way that I expect? Well, let me show you what I mean by that. If I click on these constraints, I can actually delete them by pressing the delete key on the keyboard. And I'm going to delete these out. Now you can see that some of these lines have turned blue. And if we start making a lot of changes to our sketch or our model, we might see that these start to change in some sort of strange ways. Like maybe this just comes out here, or I don't know, maybe this box starts to change into a shape that we weren't expecting, just like in this example, because it's not locked into position. So let me just go backwards and get back to the rectangle. And a general rule of thumb is that we want to use as many constraints as we can first to constrain our model, and then use dimensions afterwards. So let me give you another example, just to show you this in a bit more detail. So I'm just going to delete this out and draw something new. So I'm going to draw a line up here by, 50. And then I'm just going to draw this up here, let's say 75. And then let's put degrees on here at 75 as well, just to keep it simple. So you can see that these two lines have gone black, and it's also automatically adding constraints. So we just move that into there, and I'm just going to draw this one out at 50. And then I'm going to connect this back up at the end. So you can see with these constraints, each line has gone black now. But what if we wanted to do this another way? So I want these to be constrained, and if I delete this dimension here, you can see that this one is now blue instead of black. So it's no longer fully constrained. And I'm actually going to add this one to one of these constraints. So let me choose here parallel. And this constraint makes each line parallel. So let me show you that. If I click on this line, and then I click on this line, it's actually going to add those constraints. And now, if I change this, for example, they're both going to change in parallel. So let me put that, say, I don't know, to 50. And you can see this one moves in relation to the other one as well, because they're both parallel. Now, maybe that's something that you want. However, let's say, for example, this dimension, it needs to be locked. So this might not be exactly the right constraint. So if I go back and then I delete this constraint, and then let me add this to a sketch dimension. And from here, I press enter. Now that locks this into place at 105. So now, if I change this to say, I don't know, maybe 50 again, we actually get a different result, and you can see that it's moved in a different way. So you can see that the way we're choosing our constraints and dimensions is actually going to affect the way the sketch moves around. And the way that we would choose really which constraints or which dimensions to use is based on each individual sketch and the thing that you're actually building and how you want it to react. So this will really come down to experience and just practicing building and constraining 3D models. I'm really thinking about what are the most important dimensions of the model, or what are the dimensions that you may come back and modify later, and how you'd like the other sketch dimensions in the model to react to that. And also, I want to show you something else. So basically, if I go back to where I was, and now if I use too many constraints, so let me just add here, for example, I want to click on that, and then, you can see we get this error message, which says that it's an overconstrained sketch. And here it wants to create a driven dimension. So if I create that driven dimension, you can see that it's actually put the dimensions here in a bracket. Now a driven dimension is basically just for reference. It has no constraints or won't fix your model into place. It's not going to lock anything into position in the sketch, basically. It's just a reference. And you may be thinking, well, what's that actually useful for? Well, it's basically if you need a reference for a size. Say the length needs to be a particular size because another part fits inside it. If you are changing other dimensions, then you can quickly reference this in case it gets too big or too small, basically. And it's for things like that. And I want to show you something here. If I right click on this and try and make this a driving dimension, you can see that Fusion doesn't actually let me, and it comes up with an error. It says that the geometry is overconstrained, and I have to try and find which constraints are actually controlling it and remove them if I want to use this one instead. So I'm just going to delete this and remove that error. And something else to mention is that sometimes it's not actually practical to fully constrain every single element of every sketch. It is best practice, but it's not definitive that it's wrong if a model's not fully constrained. And also something that's useful as well, if I draw a line, for example, let's say like this, and then I come over here and I click on here, the constraint, I can actually see which constraints I can use and also which ones I can't, because they will be blanked out in grey. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you found it useful, then please do hit that like button and also subscribe. See you in the next one.